All right, Zig coming in at the top. Today on the show, we have the return of Don Rauf, singer-songwriter of the band Life in a Blender. Last when we spoke to Don, Life in the Blender blended up a Kurt Vonnegut-themed album based on his time at the Bushwick Book Club, in which a bunch of artists get together, they read a book, and then they make something based around it. And for Don, the outcome was his last record. Now, Life in a Blender is at it again with Bent by the Weather. And what I love about Life in a Blender, their tunes are like this amalgamation of like 9 different styles laced together with a clear narrative and experimental output. It's really, really cool stuff, and I think you guys are going to dig it. We're going to listen to a track off the new album. This is Crater on the Moon. Crater on the Moon, Bent by the Weather is the album. Life in a Blender is the band. Cool, very orchestrated songwriting, right? Dig the record. It's available on all the streaming platforms, wherever you get it. Yeah, and I think before we get into it, if you hear anything you like afterwards, and you're like, I wonder where I can hear more of ramblings and shenanigans as such, if you can like, rate, review, subscribe to the podcast on any of the podcast platforms, it helps me keep talking to cool guests like Don and sharing insight with you. So without further ado, this is my conversation with Don Rauf. Like, I guess to kind of jump into it, like, so jumping from that last project, which was based on like that writer's room, right? All the Vonnegut tunes, correct? Right. So with Bent by the Weather, this kind of seemed like more of a, I mean, each one had a really, like, you did a really good job of painting a narrative for each picture, like, with as like complicated as the orchestration was for all these songs, like the narrative you're placed in. So was this related to a similar thing, or are these personal experiences you're drawing from?
A couple of these songs were also for the Bushwick Book Club, where we write, songs about books or poems. So often there's a strong narrative, but then others were just out of the top of my head, some kind of just scenes that are popping in, bubbling up from the subconscious, and there they are. But I could tell you about any of the particular songs. A couple, not as many are from Bushwick Book Club on this latest album, but like that, there's this one called "My Heart Your Sweat Does Feed" that's all about bicycles, and I wrote a book about Schwinn bikes, and so the Bushwick Book Club did a show about everyone had to write a song about my book, all about, which is a real history of Schwinn bicycles, and I wrote a song about just bicycles too, for that one. So there were some songs that are just, still off of books and poems.
God, that's like, I think we touched upon the Schwinn bike thing a little bit last time, but like, those are great bikes, man. Like, that's,
yeah.
My mom had a Schwinn, and that's the bike I got when she was done riding it, and that's the only bike I got. Like, that's a great bike.
Yeah, I don't know what kind of bike if you had the Schwinn, the banana seat bike.
Yeah.
There was the Crate, and then the Stingray. First there's the Stingray, and then the Crate has the gear changer right in the middle. This like shifter. But they're all great because you had the sissy bar and the banana seat and the ape hanger handlebars.
That's okay. Well, putting a pin in that was did you say On the Sand? Was that one that was novel based, or was that?
Well, that one, On the Sand, is this. I've always loved this writer, actor, Edgar Oliver, who's a longtime East Village, New York artist. He does these great monologues. I feel like he really got recognition in the past, 10 years, because he went on the Moth radio hour and does these monologues about growing up. And Edgar's just a super interesting guy. And that On the Sand song, he wrote the words. Actually, that's the one song where all the words are from somebody else. So I don't know, you've heard it, right? It's all about this scene where his dad died when he was young in real life, and he writes this about a true life scene about going to Coney Island and seeing his friend wrestle his son and sort of wishing he had that experience. Growing up, having his dad around. Yeah. And Edgar's just super fascinating character. he'll even say, he even talks in his monologues. His voice is sort of like Bela Lugosi or Boris Karloff. It's just naturally, he has a Don. Oh, he always says, goody, a goody. If something's fun, if something pleases him, he's a goody. And he came out and we did a video recently, and we'll have the video out. We went out to Coney Island and Edgar came out and it was great. Coney Island's a great setting to film a video too. There's just so many things, so many rides and attractions and food and the boardwalk and people. Great visuals. So yeah, that song "On the Sand" all takes place in Coney Island. So it was great to go out there and film. And actually, my son filmed it, so that was fun to work with him.
Oh, that's awesome. And it's all about father and son. There you go.
Right. Oh my God, I didn't even think of that part.
Yeah, man. Well, that's an interesting, because listening through that, I'm like, I feel like this one's from something, and it's interesting with kind of just even bringing up the Boris Karloff and how this guy's cadence is. There's something that's so appealing about someone that has this thing that you can almost do an impression of, you know what I mean? But when it's almost like what they say hits harder because of that. I don't know if it's just something I've noticed. People that have kind of that kind of repeatable cadence, you kind of tune into quicker.
Right.
I mean, aside from his writing chops, just you describing this character to me, I'm I can see myself being yeah, leaning in.
Yeah, I'm going to have to send you his monologue from The Moth. Yeah, he grew up in Savannah with his mother and sister, and then his father was gone, and his mother was eccentric, and the stories he tells are just so wild and crazy. He said his mother would often like to just get them in the car. Maybe she'd get upset about something. She said, let's get in the car and drive, and they would drive for it seemed like hours. And he said, my homework, I would do my homework in the car because, mother always wanted to drive us. So I did my homework in the car. And he says, that explains my bad handwriting today. But, he's great. And he's such a great, warm, sweet person too. It turns out I was so happy to meet him because I had seen his monologues and I thought this guy's great. He's such an original voice, and to meet him, to actually get to know him was great. All through the Bushwick Book Club, and then Penny Arcade in New York is good friends with him, and she's a monologuist. I don't know if you know her name at all, but she's been around. She's been around for decades, and she's a great performer and monologuist who was around in New York back in the day of Warhol and Factory and Mud Club, and she's doing a lot of acts now, talking about her whole career back, looking back at those early days when she was starting to perform in New York, and how New York was so different, and East Village has totally changed from back in the 70s.
I guess kind of watching her kind of unwind these experiences, does it ultimately end up being more accessible now or less?
What?
Just being able to perform and being able to from her experience, does she kind of paint a picture where it was easier then or more difficult now?
Well, I think it was easier then to find because everything was cheaper.
Okay.
All the artists were in the East Village. Now it's, it just seems like the younger generation. I always say too, look around. I don't see, where are the Patti Smiths of the East Village? They're not around. It's become more gentrified, basically. People are, and I don't know, the artist spaces are fewer than they were. They're still there though. There's still these great places in the East Village that you might know, like La Mama Theater, and it was a nice sign to see Knitting Factory just took over the old Pyramid Club, which was such a big club in the East Village, and they opened it as Baker Falls recently. So there are pockets, but I think because rents are so high, back in the day it was easier when there was CBGBs and bands like Television were getting started, and Blondie and all these Ramones, and I felt like back then maybe it was just easier in New York to be creative and find the space and the places to perform and experiment.
Well, that makes sense. Yeah, in that sense, I definitely agree with that. Because if you can't afford to stay there, you can't afford to experiment there. You know what I mean?
Right. I wonder, is Cleveland more an experimental hotbed now, maybe?
There's pockets. There's pockets. I definitely think being a smaller city in comparison to Seattle and New York, right, where you're bouncing back and forth. It's like a zoomed in scene, but there are pockets of experimentation. There's a lot of cool DIY spots and opportunities and cool art galleries and stuff. And there are some old factories that are renovated into cool art spaces. There's this whole festival called Ingenuity Fest that took this broom factory, and they do this crazy walkthrough exhibit with bands on every floor of this giant factory every year. It's really cool.
Oh, that sounds good. When's that? I want to come to that.
That's in September. You totally should. That'd be sweet, man. Yeah. I would love to meet you in real life and show you around this crazy thing.
Yeah, I want to go there. I got one of my best friends, Henry Tenney. He's from there, and and I had stopped through only once in Cleveland, but it was a great time.
I can imagine
the Grog Shop or something. Was that still there?
Yeah, Grog's still there. Yep.
Grog, that's great. And I think I saw it was the first time I saw Harmar Superstar.
Okay.
I don't know if you know him, but he's a great.
I don't know him, musician. But I know of him.
You know of him, right? I saw him there at the Grog Shop, and then there was a bar, Mitzi's. Maybe that's still around. I don't know.
I don't know. Was it by the Grog? Walking distance.
I don't know.
Okay.
Anyway, but I remember it being such a great town. Even that was 20 years ago, actually. So. Yeah,
I still think the scene's still bumping, and it definitely. I think it's a very supportive musical scene, and maybe it's because it's a little zoned in. But bouncing from New York and Seattle, are you doing music and stuff in Seattle too?
I was for a while, but just lately I haven't been. I've been just working still with the great band members in New York that I've been working with for decades and decades too.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Then what brought you out to Seattle? I don't think we talked about that at all.
No. My wife. Monique's mother grew up here, and we had an opportunity to buy this family house, and then so we and this was back in 2002. But this band I'd been doing forever, I just couldn't stop doing it, so I just kept going back to New York. So that's what I'm. So I have a crazy life between Seattle and then New York. And now in Seattle, I work part-time for fun at the Swedish club out here. I just fell into it. And it's this beautiful old building from the 60s that overlooks Lake Union here in Seattle. And I bring in music on Fridays. Like last night, we had the Savoy Night Owls. And, they were playing this great jazz and a lot of covers of jazzy covers like Radiohead and
that's cool.
Soundgarden and Echo and the Bunnymen, but all done in a really good loungy, jazzy, perfect way.
Oh, dude, that's sick. Yeah, that's so rad.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. So that's where I get my musical fix is, I have to, I bring in these bands and at the Swedish club. So that's my weird life of doing that here and then going back to New York and playing the shows and with all the great people I've been playing with forever back in New York.
So yeah, to kind of dive back into, I guess, into this record with that, these songs, when I listen to the narrative is very well written. If you're especially drawing from other sources, right, and boiling down someone's narrative to a key point. So I guess my question is with that is if you're taking a work of art to make into a song. What's your kind of process of vetting what details matter in the verses to kind of get to to get the sense of the story? Are you reading this book? I know there's only a few on this album, but this is something I was kind of thinking about from our last conversation. Are you reading the book and writing key points that are you going through, or do you kind of ingest the whole story and then reflect back on it?
When I'm doing the book project, I'll be writing down some phrases or sentences too that just seem like they could be in a song too. Just somehow have some maybe a musicality in the actual words. But then maybe you're just sort of letting it all mulch in your brain and to see what pops up, what ideas. Because then you're sitting down with the piano or the guitar and you're trying to get something from the book. I mean, it doesn't have to be a synopsis of the book and from the song. It could just be a scene, or it could just be a feeling that you get from the book, or it could be something that the book reminds you of. Susan Wong, who started the Bushwick Book Club, she's very open about, just do whatever it is that has inspired you from that work, from the book. So it could be anything. And I like that she brings in not just musicians, she'll bring in dancers or, other, maybe somebody will just do a poem based on a book, so it's mostly music, mostly songs, but sometimes she'll bring in these other artists. Or somebody will do like a little tiny quick puppet show based on the book, or something like that.
Awesome. Because I guess my process, like with trying to because like what I love about what you guys do is these songs like build up into these incredible like orchestrated pieces, and I'm like, okay, the verse part fits here, like, and then the chorus part has this whole like genre twist, like at the table.
Oh yeah, I'm glad you brought up that one. Yeah,
yeah. That one, like, the first two verses set up like this character that's been screwed over in different settings. Like every verse brings another like weight to that narrative, and I'm like, oh, this is so good. And then you get to the chorus part, and it completely bees into a different like section. So I guess like the writing with that, do you like? Is it like kind of writing this narrative and then bringing it to the group, or writing this narrative with those musical changes and bringing it to the group, or is it kind of a
yeah? I had those musical changes in mind, and that particular song too. Like I was thinking about my father lived into his 90s, and he was put into we had to get him into like a care home, a nursing type of home, and his dementia was getting worse, and I would come visit him. And so, but the first part of that song is about him saying, it's just more about him thinking like, boy, after all the years of work, he's in I was thinking too, he's in this little room with his, cabinet and his smiley cup and his pills and his compression socks, I'm saying, because he had a, whatever it was with his heart pressure, so it's like, is this all I get after all the years and all the sweat? Is this all I get? And then my dad, though, would be in this situation that seemed kind of, not glamorous. And then at night, though, when he would go to sleep, and I would sometimes, stay over, or I would hear him, he would dream, and he sounded like he was at the greatest party in the world. When my father went to sleep in his 90s, you'd hear him started talking in his sleep, laughing, and you couldn't quite make it out, but it sounded like he was, just having this great time. So when that song shifts for me, it's my dad's going. You never know this just from hearing the song, but for me, it's him going into this other world where it's like, okay, now he's away from the nursing home and the sort of drudgery of that, and he's entered this great party where there's music and talk, and it feels like he's back at his young self and having a great time.
That's beautiful. It's such a good song, and like that, knowing that little bit makes it even cooler, because that whole transition, like, it gets that feeling that you're describing right now. And now like how you're saying, like, unless I read something about it or talked to you about it, I guess I wouldn't like know for sure, but that's so cool how that moves like that. Very well done. So
and then I wanted it to shift kind of into an old timey, or because he was old timey,
right? Well, that
so
makes it even
the
cooler.
song sort of shifts into that,
yeah.
I don't know, but what do you want to call it? It's just an old timey feel of more like maybe a 20s feel or something, that instead. And and I always tell this story too. Like, it's just that during the day, when one of the first times my dad is there in the home, the attendant comes out and they put him in a wheelchair and they say, it's activity time. And they wheel him out to this circle, and they wheel out the other old folks, and they put them all in a circle, and then they have this slightly floating balloon, regular balloon, and they put it in the middle of the circle, and all the people like my dad who are there have to say, okay, now we're going to pat the balloon and pat it back and forth in a circle to each other. And I just remember my dad. I remember that seeming like such a sad scene, and my dad looking over at me, like going, in his eyes, it read almost what I said in the song. Is this all I get? Really? You're going to put me in this? You're going to leave me here in this circle, patting this balloon back and forth? I felt like I don't want to be here, and I felt bad, but that's where we arrived. So there's probably a sadness to that song too, but then the happy part of in the dreamland becomes more, more happy.
Right, right. But I mean, like, oh man, that is because that's heavy, man. That's heavy. And it's like, shit. Is that like? Because are we? You hustle?
Are we all?
Are we all just gonna be patting that balloon? Yeah.
What's that?
I said, are we all just gonna be patting that balloon, man? Like,
I know. Is this where we're gonna all wind up here? Although I did see Mick Jagger, a few days ago here in Seattle.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was thinking, look, God, he's 80 and he looked like he was so limber. I said, it looked like he had his spine removed, because he's just wiggling around like crazy still. And he's running up and down the runway. And God, his voice is still intact. It's not like Bob Dylan's voice, I felt like went from a certain register, right, to kind of gravelly and gruff. But here's Mick, and I feel like his voice is spot on from the old days.
It's amazing, isn't it? I totally agree with that because, like, when they dropped that song with Stevie Wonder and Lady Gaga, I'm like, oh my God, this sounds like the Stones from like this, like off like it. I don't know, like this anything out of the '70s. It sounds right, spot on, man.
Yeah, and they did that at the show, and it was really powerful and great. Yeah. And he's doing all these great ones where he's really wailing like "Give Me Shelter," and it's amazing. That steady diet of sex, drugs, rock and roll maybe is actually really good for you. And Keith Richards looked great, and Ron Wood looked great. I mean, I thought they weren't running up and down like crazy, but they were playing beautifully. So maybe that's the secret to ward off. So you don't wind up. Mick's not going to wind up in the balloon circle.
Yeah, yeah. Man, because like I do nursing home gigs, and like they're rough, because like you kind of have that thought, like, what happens? You know what I mean? Like there's some things you just can't. It just happen, like a stroke or something awful, And like then you see like anomalies, like how you're like Mick Jagger, and like is it the excitement of all that keeps someone going like that? Like, you know what I mean? Like, is it the non-stoppery, like the never thinking that you're going to retire at all, that thought that you will keep moving, that you can't stop moving, like. The lingering idea of retirement, is that too comforting in a way that just like
right? I mean, now that you bring it up, that's what it seems like. If you're not connected to retiring, and you're not having something to drive you on and look forward to, maybe. I think maybe you're right. Being in a band like that keeps going. So we'll have to keep going with Life in a Blender because that'll keep us,
I definitely agree, man.
As young as we look. I feel like we look older than Mick Jagger. And we're decades younger.
On a side note, man, I gotta I've been thinking about getting tickets to the Stones because they're playing in Cleveland. I'm like, oh man, they're like, for some reason they were super expensive. I don't know if I'm on the wrong site or some shit. Like, there's no way nosebleeds are $800. Like, really?
That was they had a cheaper nosebleed seats out here of like $65.
So I'm probably on a scalper site. So
I don't know. I don't know what the secret is. And there were. I mean, it was a huge crowd, but there were still seats. I think they were somehow getting seats out there in the $65 range just to help fill it too.
Yeah. Because like another, like on that topic of like the comparison of them to Dylan, because I've seen Dylan a few times, and like what do you think that is, that kind of, as a vocal like performer, do you think it's the maintenance, that like the exercise, the warm up, the different type of range, like Bob Dylan's, I guess, because he's someone who's been on the never ending tour forever. Like,
yeah. I mean, I don't know there. I mean, some voices do just change and go, and like, what's his name too? The Canadian guy. Oh, that's young. Well, I guess his voice has changed a bit too. I was thinking Leonard Cohen. I feel like his voice changed over the year. Not that he was a big, powerful singer or anything, but I feel like his register maybe changed as he went along. But what's the secret? I wonder. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Why does Mick stay the same? Or I was just hearing Roger Daltrey on a clip the other day, and he was singing Tommy, and I thought his voice is pretty spot on. I think Paul McCartney's voice maybe has changed a little bit, but it's still powerful.
Right.
So, but I don't. Yeah, who knows? Probably, they're Mick's probably taking some secret shake of embryonic cells, and
he's got the money for it. That's for sure. He's got that.
Right.
That sticky fingers money. You know what I mean? That.
Yeah. He's going off to some secret lab in Switzerland and getting injections of something, calf's blood or
whoa. Children's blood.
Right.
Do you do vocal warm-ups and such? Do you find yourself having to practice like that?
I don't. I just barrel in. I know if I haven't rehearsed in a while, the first bunch of songs are a lot of cobwebs blown out of the tank. But yeah, I probably could benefit from getting some vocal lessons, but I've just been naturally loud. I've had a naturally loud voice anyway, so maybe that helps me out. But
I mean, I think a big part of vocal stuff is learning how to breathe, and you spend so much time doing the thing. So if you just naturally do it, like the breathing and projecting right, if you just do that from the rip, I think you skip the lessons. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and maybe just over the years of recording and Al Houghton, who is our guitarist for years and years, he runs a studio, Dubway Studios, and I feel like he has such a great ear in recording that when I'm in the vocal booth, he'll say, well, that's a little sharp, and then the more you have it pointed out, I feel like your ear adjusts a bit too, and you hear, oh yeah, okay, more in your brain, like what's a little sharp, what's a little flat. After doing that,
for sure, yeah.
When somebody's telling you, you hear it. And, he's a big advocate when you're recording too. He'll say, okay, loosen up, wiggle those shoulders, probably like Mick does, and get your voice, relaxed. Don't push it, don't strain it. The more relaxed you are, the more you're going to be on the note.
I think. Did he track this record?
I mean, pretty much he's the producer, really. He recorded, we went up, a lot of this was a great musician's holiday where we recorded it upstate at this Hidden Quarry Studios. This guy, Danny Bloom, runs this place up near Woodstock. Okay. Not really hidden at all. It's right there in front of you. But we went there and it was a great long weekend, maybe for a lot of these songs where I feel like we went like 4 days, and you can sleep over there and wake up in the morning. And I think it's what I think a lot of musicians like that whole setup, wow, this is the dream. We wake up in the morning, have coffee, start recording. Then at night we can just walk over to this apartment basically and cook dinner and hang out and
do it again. Yeah. That is definitely
the next day. But Al was there, but we were at Danny Bloom's studio, and Al really, still is the directing force of recording. And then we did some work at his studio at Dubway in New York City. I'm giving the plugs for everybody behind the scenes here.
But that's okay, because on kind of on the idea of guitar, one thing I noticed, and it may be just the guitar player's ear, during the song "My Heart, Your Sweat Does Feed."
Yeah,
that Talking Heads groovy one. There's this breakdown, and then there's this guitar part that's like that. Right. But also in Crater on the Moon, right after the chorus, that same lick comes in there. It's not. It's pitched differently. It's like a stylistic thing that it sounds like it's.
Yeah.
But I wondered if that was a purpose thing, like a reflection back to the thing that came before it. Or if it's just perchance.
Right. I'm going to say perchance, but now I'll have to talk to Al, and maybe he'll say, "Oh no, of course, I was trying to echo the previous song."
Of course, but that guy was hip. He knew what's up.
Yeah. I was trying to do something super clever there, but I think it was just all perchance, just coming out of that. Yeah, this sludge, and I always think something in the subconscious is just kind of bubbling up and brings it to the fore.
Right. And I also think like you have your own vocabulary, like, you know, as a person, as a musician, as a writer, you use common phrases just because it's from you, you know?
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, Al, I mean, all that guitar stuff is great. Yeah. I don't know. Al's just such a phenomenal guitar player. And then Mark, you know, a lot of the stuff is so, orchestrated really with horns and strings, and Mark Lerner, the bass player, just does a amazing job with all the parts. You know, he'll chart out all the stuff when it comes to the horns and the strings, and you know, I just feel like so much of that really adds. I mean, we had that one song, a regular heartbeat, that's kind of what do you want to call it? Reggae.
It's got like a reggae feel.
And when the horns come in, wow, it's a blast.
No, yeah, that definitely brings out. So okay, so the bass player, bass man, he's bringing out a lot of these extra textures. Then, yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
definitely.
Okay,
yeah. I mean,
okay. Because like,
I mean, yeah, you wouldn't suspect the unassuming bass man.
The bass man. No, you've talked to Mike Watt, right?
Right.
He expects the bass man to be doing it.
Yeah. He expects a lot, Mike Watt, from the musicians on there. I feel like, you know, it's like, you know, he'll say like, oh, I said, well, and whatever. In the late '80s, we toured. You know, maybe we went out there and played 30 days a year. 30 days. Why didn't you just get in a van and play every single day, no matter where you are, like I did? Well, you know.
That's his MO, man. He's still doing it. He's like,
it's great.
I
love
awesome.
It. Yeah. He's got the true, you know, get to work, get out there, just do it.
I talked to him so in 2020 when MSSV did their like 30 or 40 day, it was something ridiculous. It was like a 50-day tour or something. I'm like, wow, man, 50 days? That's a lot. He's like, oh, back in the day, Black Flag, we did 72 days, no stop. You know what I mean? He's just like,
yeah.
I was trying to compliment him, and he was like, oh, this is nothing. You know?
I like too that we were both imitating him as like a foghorn leghorn or something. You know? I know he doesn't talk like that, but for some reason in my head now, he's become an old Civil War general. Back in the day, we didn't do that.
He's the best, man.
Yeah. No, he is great. He's great. And I love his show. He's so supportive still of all independent music.
And like just on top of everything he's doing, man, he cranks one of those out every week, you know, or like I can't remember if it's every 2 a week or something. He's doing a lot of them, man. But
it'd always be a big regret not going to see Minutemen when I had a chance in the younger days. You know?
Yeah. Were you kind of circling? Were you kind of circling that type of music when you were getting into music?
But I mean, I don't think I was ever quite there. I mean, I liked it. I mean, if we're thinking more like punk rock, I mean, the first song we did is probably the most punk rock that I did way back in high school. Poughkeepsie City is Sin, because it's just the way it came out. You know, it was a satirical song about my hometown growing up in Poughkeepsie, and that's what got me all really hooked. And Dave Moody, he was the bass player at the time, and now he plays cello and rhythm guitar in the band. We're the core of the band, and we've been doing stuff since junior high. But then in high school, we wrote that song, Poughkeepsie City is Sin, probably the closest to the punkish type of stuff that you know, Minutemen do, and that type of stuff. You know, I've always liked, you know, that ethic and that music, but my stuff's more, like we were saying, more orchestrated, and I don't know how to describe it. It's rock, but it's got its quirky bends and everything, but it's not I say it doesn't feel totally punky. Maybe you hear some punkiness. I don't know.
In spirit, I feel, because you're hitting all these different genres and bringing out all these different things. That's pretty punk in the attitude, you know. So when you guys did that first song, can you kind of tell me about that moment there? Like, did you guys know you wanted to write music together? Was this a thing you did just for fun, and then it blossomed into like this obsession?
Yeah, I feel like once we did that song, it blossomed. And Dave, I was never the true musician. I mean, sort of, I was tinkering around and but got more and more into it. And Dave was always in the rock and roll bands in high school. This band called Dark Horse, and they would be playing, you know, the things, and then I would come in with like funny ideas, and then slowly, you know, we gelled into our Life in a Blender band. But once we did that Poughkeepsie City of Sin, we went. I may have told you this story before, but we entered at the time. We entered the local gong show, which was a big deal in Poughkeepsie, and we had that song, and we were underage, and we, you know, were in the Chance Saloon in Poughkeepsie, which was the swing and rock and roll club, and we performed with all these other acts, and they had judges, and the place was packed. And these two other women we knew, they did Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy, you know, that old World War II tune. They did that, and we tied with them for first place, right?
Yeah.
And then they said, we're going to push out the applause meter, which was totally, you know, a made up kind of device they had, but they pushed out the applause meter, people applauded. And, you know, however they ran that applause meter, it said, okay, you got, you know, we won with Poughkeepsie City of Sin. So that got us hooked. And then I remember, because we won, I didn't tell my parents that somehow I snuck out and was there with Dave, because we were underage and we were in a bar, and, you know, somehow we got in and were able to do all this. But then I remember calling my parents saying, like, we won the gong show. And they were like, wait, aren't you in bed? You're supposed to be home right now. Not in a club.
That's awesome.
But yeah, so that got us hooked. You know,
Okay.
We did that, and then we recorded. People wanted to record it. We did 45s, and they would play it on the local radio station after we recorded it. And that's really got the bug. That whole night really was pivotal.
It's wild that all it takes is one great gig to get you through all the awful gigs. You know what I mean? You're like,
Right.
you get that bite, and you're like, whoa! Like,
Yeah, we're still living off the thrill of that bite. You know, after a bad show like last week or something, you could go like, well, but remember in high school we had a good show, so we got to keep going.
well, yeah. But yeah, I don't know. There's something that feels like this thing, like I have this mode of expression. Before you guys even did that, were you writing and stuff? Like more than just what school kind of required?
Yeah, well, I mean, honestly, too, we were interested in doing like skits and comedy and
Okay,
that
so
kind
you
of
had
stuff
this.
too. We're doing like music and some comedy stuff too. We would go to the local Poughkeepsie Cablevision, and film it. We realized hey, local cable would let you come in and film stuff, and so somehow we registered that, and we filmed. We made it a habit of going in, and they would air it. And we thought that was the coolest thing in the world. I feel like people, I don't even know if it's out there anymore. Local cable TV, always had its local presence, and you had public access to it, and you could go in, even New York City, everywhere. So we took advantage of that and dipped in and did all crazy skits and stuff. Even though we're young, I'm sure a lot of it makes you cringe today. Our stuff, because we were just knuckleheads trying to
be funny,
be creative. Yeah,
trying to be funny.
right. But it was a great outlet. See, I don't know, is public access cable out there where people could still do that today? I mean, there were political local government shows, and people could go on and do almost anything they wanted, because that was the basis of public access cable TV.
I mean, I know it exists. Like, it's not that it doesn't, but I don't think.
Yeah, I don't see it on my cable options anymore. Out here in Seattle, where is that public access that used to exist?
I'm pretty sure that now it's YouTube.
Right. Yeah, you're right. Exactly right. You just make your YouTube videos and post it. The internet is public access.
Yeah. Which is cool because now it's in everyone's hands, but also like all the void you scream in to try to get like a beacon of like, oh, I think I heard something.
Right. Yeah, it's the void is so much bigger.
Yes.
to find, you're just a little dot of light in the huge universe. But somehow when there are fewer channels, if you got on one of those fewer channels, then yeah, you felt like maybe you got more attention.
Right. Or maybe it's just, I feel like you weren't watching. Oh, no one saw it. You just did it. You know what I mean? Like, you can't
Right.
see this like numeric, like a judgment that happens from when you do a thing. Which
Right.
sucks. It's like, ah, shit. You put all this time into all this stuff, and you're like, well, all right, I guess I do the next thing. Like, shit.
Right. 3 views on that rather than we could delude ourselves back then. I'm sure, thousands are watching us on Poughkeepsie Cablevision.
But also just to avoid yourself of the worry of a number. You know what I mean? Like, just to do the thing, I think is more impactful than the number of attention it gets, And like, the better the thing is, because you're not worried about the number, the people, or like the count. You just worry about making a good thing. But
yeah, right. Exactly.
Another song on this album, perfect turning point here, that I wanted to ask you about was "Crater on the Moon." I really like that song, man. The chorus and the pre-chorus, like the harmonies on that, are so good.
Oh, great! Yeah, I feel like that one's quite a sonic journey too. And I wrote a lot on piano on this album, and that one I wrote on piano too. I often would be writing on guitar, but I felt like that was maybe made songs sound a little different from previous albums too. We come in, I always want the songs start one place, you're like, what kind of beat do you want to? And I feel like eventually that song, it's all a bit stronky and pots and pans going on, and then he, a few measures in, Ken kicks into a twist beat, and I think that it sort of makes it more accessible. It's very noisy and off kilter, and then there's the twist beat part, makes it sort of more palatable, and then it then drifts off too into this dreamy section where there's oohing, and it gets kind of spacey. Yeah, I don't know. So I always enjoy doing that one too, because I feel like it's a bit of a journey in 3 minutes.
Well, definitely, and like, but it's really catchy, man. Like that hook into the verses and the chorus, man. Like, it's really good.
What can I say about that? Yeah,
you have to say
the weirdo love song. All the imagery is pretty off the charts, I think, and bizarre, and just I don't know, but yeah, it's fun. Yeah,
it's a great tune, man. It's great too.
The guitar middle part, it's just very like a rickety wagon full of pots and pans coming down the trail at you.
Crater, sort of broken crater on the moon, man. Another one I wanted to ask you about was I think it's "Don't Be Afraid." You're like, I think it's the only time, at least that I can recall, you singing a full song in like kind of a head voice range.
Yeah, that's pretty. I mean, that's all falsetto, and I know it's almost like in the Neil Young zone of singing. How he has that super high voice, and I admit, I mean, that one's more. I was thinking about the whole. There's a lot of imagery there about it was coming at the time when people were really protesting and going out and pulling down statues, and and all this wasn't long ago. Now I look at the song and say, it feels like millions of years ago when all this was happening in history in our lives, when people were marching for Black Lives Matter and George Floyd and protests over excessive police violence, and in the wake of George Floyd's death and all, there was statues were being pulled down, outrage over racism was really reaching a peak, and statues were coming down, Confederate monuments were coming down, and statues of Christopher Columbus were coming down, and outrage was there in the country, and I think it was all justified, and somehow that's buried in that song. I get to have these thoughts in my head, and then out comes a song that people go, well, the song that probably doesn't reflect it as my message is buried in there, or what's driving that song is probably buried in that song.
But in like that keeps it open so everyone can
right
drive it themselves and what they get out of it, which is what a good a good work does, man.
I mean, I know that's a kind of a quiet, mellow song, but you know, it was based on sort of a outrage at the time, and I thought that outrage would be sustained. But now that I look back, it feels like it was just a nanosecond, and you know, certain things. You know, I mean, it was all anyway. It's now I'm going down a rabbit hole in my mind of where that came from. But you know, for me, like if you looked at the events leading up to this horrible George Floyd's death in 2020, it was part of this whole culture I feel built on Trump, and there were white nationalists marching in Charlottesville back in 2017 around then, and I don't know, and that was sort of the fuse. It was lit, and then it led up to us all being out in the street, and then the horrible things happened. We're marching. We're still dealing with acts of police violence. Open the paper today, and there's just people. I feel like there's horrible incidents where innocent people get shot. Anyway, but where the outrage. Maybe there aren't as many incidents right now. And I'm not sure exactly why. Maybe it's because somebody's not the president right now.
Well, I think there's definitely. I mean, there's definitely a bunch of horrible shit going on. Like there's,
right.
Like there's 2 wars happening. Shit. Like,
right. Yeah, there's all that too. Yeah, I know. As soon as I say one thing, I'm like, oh yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, but just the kind of dramatization of like of the kind of political narrative has been like mediaized. Like it's so like it definitely. But that time was definitely like hot as far as like an emotional hot button on so many different things for perspective and like shit that was going on. So that makes sense why that flame would be lit in that. And I think a lot of flames were lit during that time period. And like hopefully don't
especially here, the incidents we're having here in this country. I know now we're dealing with so much abroad, maybe more so even. Yeah. But I guess too the idea that it really was recent, but I feel like people forget instantly stuff that just happened a couple of years ago.
Yeah, but also I think that kind of goes back to that like the quickness of how we consume things too. Like the with the internet and like how things are consumed within us and how we take in media news. It's such a flash in the pan before the next flash in the other pan. Not that those things are small things; those are heavy things. You know what I mean? But it's interesting, like because I think this song is a reflection of that. This is a holy shit moment, and this is you interpreting this holy shit moment and putting it out in a meaningful way, and like it's kind of crazy that we kind of have all this coming at us all the time. I guess is what I'm trying to say, and like
right.
I guess we're lucky to know and lucky to be in this range where we can like examine things and not be hit by them, I guess.
Although sometimes we don't examine things, or it just washes over us, and we're on to the next things, or we don't think like, actually, when you look back, you see this whole pattern of what happened in history in our country. But sometimes I think we just keep rushing ahead forward. Like you said, we're so flooded by media stories that one thing just replaces the other, and but we often don't have time to reflect.
Yeah, that too. So I guess is that what it means to be bent by the weather?
Yeah, I think so. That's a good point. See, I need you to, you're like the psychologist. You can go to a band and say like, well, I know what's going on here. I know what your songs are doing. Yeah. So I think, we're definitely bent by the weather describes exactly the whole album. Yeah, we've been battered by all these things, and we've got bent. And there's a lot of bent sounds going on in this album, I think.
Well, yeah, no, definitely. So is that, I guess, like on a serious version of that question, is that title coming from like the genre bending or like the sound bending or like the character arcs within the stories being bent?
I think, all that. The phrase I just like, but I think it just did really apply to where we are. We've been around a while. We've been weathering so many different things in life, and then I felt like we were bent by the weather. And that name, along with that image that came up, a friend of mine Vaughn Trackman is this great photographer, and she does real analog rather than digital work and collage style stuff. And this image of whatever it is, a woman or is it a man? It looks like a woman. I don't know. You know, she's being sort of blown through a fierce weather pattern, hurricane, whatever, over those looks like telephone wires. You know, it's a very dreamy image, and that kind of sealed it for us. I think that we said, "Oh, this is a great image for the cover," and kicking around that title, and all these songs sound a bit bent and crazy. So
it's a beautiful record, man, and I'm a fan of your work from before and continue to. So I appreciate you taking some time to chat with me, and like, especially from our two in the morning texting about what we were going to do this morning. I really appreciate it, my friend.
And you sound wide awake. Good.
Likewise.
Our brains are
we did it.
Almost functioning.
We did it. We're awake. We're here.
We did it. That's great. The time just flew by. So.
It did. But it did the last time too, man, because I enjoyed talking with you.
Can I always, you know, can I say that, you know, I always want to make sure I plug everybody in the band.
That's what I was about to say. Can we, what if we haven't plugged something, let's do it. Show, release, band members, let's hear it.
Yeah. Well, we mentioned Al Houghton, the great guitarist, and Mark Lerner, the bassist, and everybody's been with the band for centuries. Ken Meyer, spanking the cans on the drums, and he's always terrific. And then Rebecca Weiner Tompkins playing the violin, also just, you know, great contribution. She lives in Nashville now a lot, but she's like me, keeps coming back to New York to keep doing the band. Dave Moody, my oldest friend from junior high, on cello and rhythm guitar. And who am I leaving out? I think I've said everybody in the core of the band. And, you know, then we had these great horn players. Kevin Moeringer. You know, I should make sure I'm getting all these names right. But if you can, who can be patient for all this? I'm going to tell you. Okay, Kevin Moeringer on trombone, and Jackie Coleman on trumpet, and Cheryl Kingen. If you don't mind me squeezing these in, they're the Colony Claps horn.
I dig this.
She's on the saxophone, and actually, when you mentioned that song, "Don't Be Afraid," she plays this great. You know, it's really sax heavy on that song, which normally I'm not gravitating towards sax, but she does this great deep buried sax sound on that song, and it's a couple tracks of that, and I think it works really well. And an old friend from college, Brian Culver, who it's hard to dig him out of his apartment, but he came and played trumpet on one song, "A Hole in the Sky," at the end of the album. Ed Pastorini, he's off the charts piano player, had a band 101 Crustaceans, and he makes dirty on the piano there. So I just wanted to say, Scott Anthony, Storybook Sound, he did the mastering, applied the mastering grease to make the whole album digestible for your human ears. So and I mentioned Danny Bloom earlier, Hidden Quarry, and I think that's Susan Wong, Bushwick Book Club, she sings. So we give her immense gratitude. And Chris Rail, who I live with on Avenue A in St. Mark's, also contributes some great vocals. And he's the founder of Fang Records, which are albums on. And he also has a super band called Church of Betty. But we've been old friends too, and used to live together in the East Village. So it was great. We had a lot of people who are important in our lives on this album.
That's beautiful. And we're all bent by the weather, man. When's it come out?
When does it come out?
Yeah.
Oh, it comes out right now.
Right? Oh, okay. Well, because I've only been going off that advance link you gave me, so I'm assuming.
I can send you. I'll send you a physical copy if you like such things.
Sure, please.
And, I mean, basically, we've been promoting it over the past few weeks. You know, so it's basically out there. You know.
Okay. Beautiful, man. Is there
you go to Bandcamp. We already did a release show at Joe's Pub just a short while back in New York, and then we're going back June 22nd to Manhattan and playing this great place, Mama Tried. That's in Brooklyn under the BQE. It has an outdoor space, and you look up and you see the traffic, but it all sounds great there. It's a great rock and roll spot. You know, it's out there on Bandcamp like usual and all the channels. It's out now on Spotify, and anybody who wants to hear Bent by the Weather can tune in.
beautiful. For some reason, the friends that ever wanted to venture out of the city, we can set something up there.
Oh, we should do that. And in fact, also thinking, Chris Butler from The Waitresses.
Yes,
you remember?
Yes.
Yeah, right. Was he on your show too? He was on, maybe.
Yes,
right?
I talked to him a long while ago, but
yeah, I mean, he's in Akron, I believe, right?
Yes.
But he's a big Ohio champion, and basically lived there his whole life. He's Mr. Ohio. I met him in New York and Hoboken, but now he's back in Ohio.
Yes. He's
Waitresses, Tin Huey, and we're old friends. I could see it'd be great to like team up with somebody like him and come to you and see if we could do a show or something, because he's got his Ohio people, and then we could drum up all our Ohio people that we know some.
If you'd want to, just let me know, and I would love to host you and Chris. That'd be sweet, because I know I did the interview with Chris, and I'd see him in passing, and because he's everywhere, and he's a super cool guy. So it's just like to have a reason to put all this together. That'd be great, man.
That would be super great. And he produced our first record, which is only on vinyl, but that was back in the late 80s.
No way. Okay. Snap. I didn't know.
But yeah, I was always a huge fan of The Waitresses. Before I met him, I was like, oh my God, this is great stuff. I Know What Boys Like, Christmas Rapping. And I thought, oh, this is really tuneful. I mean, in a way, it was like so simpatico, because there's a sense of humor going on. The songs are complex and orchestrated and have horns often, and I had seen him live before I met him, and I thought, oh, this is a great show. And Patty Donahue, who's the lead singer, what a great presence, what a great front woman she was. So to have a chance way back then to work with him was always an honor and treat, and I was always excited from square one that we met and got to work together right away, and then stayed friends to this day.
He's such a good guy, man. That's awesome.
Yo, Spike Spiegel here. You just listened to Zig of the Gig podcast. Keep riding the bebop. See you, Space Cowboy. Bang.